I know a lot of architects out there, have a lot of all these moving parts in-house, but I think that when you are able to branch out and bring people from anywhere that are the most, appropriate for the assignment, oh, it just allows you to learn so much more and be so much, more free to the ideas.
So we're super excited today to have Kona Gray from EDSA Landscape Architects on. Kona's a top guy. We've met him so many times through hospitality industry events, and he's got a unique take on his purpose, his background, his history, especially as it relates to global landscape design and those influences he's had on them. So welcome, Kona.
Thank you so
Welcome,
much. Really
Kona.
appreciate it, man. Hi,
So
Anissa.
excited to see you today. I just want to add to
Like,
that introduction because I think we've met at HD Summit in Palm Springs. I think that's the first time we met.
that was the first time.
Yeah, we did an activity together, and we're on the way to the activity. I was sitting next to you on the bus, and I was thinking when you got on the bus, I was like, this guy has such a cool style. Like, I want to talk to him. And then I remember we were like talking about philosophy, business, leadership, spirituality, purpose, being a human being, being a dad, and it was just literally this all round aligning with like our philosophy and way of life and integrating that into the work. And I was just so excited after that. And I said to Ben, you got to meet this guy. You got to meet Kona in the evening. So super excited to talk about all of those things because they influence our work, they influence life. And I just really love the way you're thinking and putting that into your work. So just as a little addition to Ben's intro.
I appreciate that, and must say that your company and the work you do and who you are is just really fantastic. I've had a lot of opportunity to look through the your website and to check out writings about you, and I've listened to many of the podcasts since we began this conversation, and they've all been really intriguing and super inspiring, and so it's quite the honor I feel to be invited to be a part of this. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, yeah, we really appreciate your time. We know everybody's busy in this world, and sometimes it's hard to press that pause button, but we think it's super important at the same time.
It is. We all need to make time. I think that's the one thing that we lose sight of is time is such an amazing luxury that a lot of folks are really not always appreciating and taking the time to be in the moment and to care about folks and to learn and to be humble. I think there are just some of the hallmarks of just being a true human being.
We were having a conversation yesterday with our team about raising standards, and we feel that in this fast-paced world, that standards can easily slip because you're being asked to make a quick decision or cut the budget or just this will do. And at times we found ourselves almost getting sucked into that, and we were like, hold on a minute, that's not what we stand for, who we are. So we were just having a conversation internally about upping our standards and almost going the other way. So is that something you see as well in your field?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for many decades, our firm has been really focused on quality, making sure that our clients are successful, making sure that we're successful, certainly having fun while we're going through that process, and it has been a challenge. Just full disclosure. I mean, during the years of extreme prosperity and busyness in the mid 2000s, I mean, we saw this explosion of just so many things happening and so many projects coming forth that we you know never felt were projects that you would normally look at. I mean, these were pretty significant opportunities, and we grew to a point where it almost got unattainable, where you almost didn't know all the people on the team, and that quality, that whole focus on making sure that what we were doing, it really sets not just a high bar, but also responds to our long-standing history, was really critical for us to keep track on. And we all went through the lull, of both the pandemic as well as the Great Recession, and now we're in it again. It's just some of the work we're doing is just It's mind blowing. I mean, it's just really fascinating, the types of projects, the scale, the budgets, the complexity. It's all just all over the place, and we're having to remind ourselves to take a moment. You don't always say yes. Look through this very, very carefully, and make wise decisions. It's a challenge because it's hard to slow down when things are really going so fast and they're
Mm-hmm.
so amazing.
How do you slow down?
Yeah, I think it's just being honest with yourself. I think it's like, when I said earlier, you don't have to say yes to everything. There are many moments in time where no is an amazing word. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we're really stepping back and saying, that's a really great idea, but right now we can only do this part. Still being responsive, certainly, but not just being, yes, we'll do everything, because when you do that, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. It's getting to the point where you really put so much into creating a quality business that cares, and you can easily lose that by becoming a commodity and just churning things out the door.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and from our side as a growing company, you like to say yes because you think, okay, well maybe this leads to
Yeah.
a bigger opportunity or there's something down the line, but it's definitely backfired for us at times where we can't. It's a smaller job, so then it doesn't get the priority it deserves, and it actually we've learned that saying no has actually been more beneficial than saying yes at times.
Yeah, and also when you say no, I mean, finding a solution for that no. It may not be you, it may be someone else that has the expertise and the time. And in that sense, you become a resource for that client or that particular friend that's looking for some way to solve a problem. So
So
it's a bit of a double-edged sword sometimes.
yeah. I mean, what you're explaining, Kona, is very much something that you gain experience with over the time and being kind of in leadership and leadership experience. Is there anything that you feel like growing up, and we can maybe go a bit into your background as well,
Hmm.
because not everyone
Sure.
knows your background. Is there anything that from like family upbringing has instilled in you to think that way as well, to think with that bigger picture, that bigger purpose, that positivity? What's your background? How did you get
Yeah,
on
so
this earth, and how did you get into landscape architecture?
No, I love telling this story because I mean, everyone has a very unique story, and it all ties back to connection to family. And so my family is from a small country in West Africa called Liberia. And Liberia has a very fascinating history, a strong connection to the U.S., established for freed slaves in the 1800s. It's one of those really unique colonial stories, and colonization has its good things and bad things. But what's interesting to me is that it afforded me and my family the opportunity to see people from all over the world. So we grew up globally. I was fortunate enough to be born in the U.S. When my parents immigrated for their education. They both immigrated from Liberia, didn't know each other. Immigrants hang out together, so they met at a party, fell in love, got married, had two kids. Oh, this is all during undergrad, and which was really.
Wow,
I think
yeah.
about that today. I'm like, going, were they crazy?
Yeah.
What were they doing? And so, and then they continue their studies, went to Seattle, Washington, and studied at the University of Washington, UW, and then made their way back to Africa, and that's where my father began his practice, and my mother began her career in healthcare. And it really sort of solidified the understanding that I knew at some point I would be involved with, design and caring for people, and landscape architecture really lines that all up. And
Mm-hmm.
those early days in Boston when they immigrated, it was a strange time. It was the early 60s. And, being, immigrants from an African country was a little, a little different. You didn't have a large community to kind of tie into as some of the
Yeah.
historic immigrants that came over from Italy or from Ireland and other places around the world. And so it was very challenging for them. And both my sister and I sort of followed in their footsteps, and we all came back to the States in the early 80s, and I experienced a very similar culture shock, immigrating as the African kid to Atlanta, Georgia. So
Wow,
going
yeah.
to the South, being the African kid in the South that didn't, fit in with the white American kids or the Black American kids because I was just different. You know, but I think what allowed me to really grow from that was seeing the perspective of humanity and realizing that we all need the same things and learning that hey, I don't have to be in this group. I can get to know everyone, and that has served me very well throughout my entire life.
Yeah, but that really forged like a very global perspective. I mean, that early on,
Absolutely.
yeah. And being connected to, like you're saying, to your own culture and roots, but also to other cultures, because you're not identifying yourself just with one group. And I think that really
Absolutely.
reflects in the work you're doing now as well, and understanding the different places that you're designing for. So that's a really
It
big part,
does.
yeah.
It does. Yeah. My father worked for a joint venture company. It was a Liberian joint venture with the U.S. and Sweden, and my elementary days were spent at an international school. So all my friends were
Mm.
from all over the world. It's a company called Lamco that was it's still very well connected. There's a strong community of kids that remember growing up, in the compound basically. But it was quite the experience of just getting to know people from all over the world.
It's amazing how maybe at the time we don't realize how those influences are going to help us in life or in our careers. But
Oh yeah,
yeah, it really does both, for us, for Anita's heritage, my heritage, and then experiencing the United States, and especially in the hospitality industry, which I know you do a lot of work in too, that the clientels aren't one race or nationality. You're designing from people all around the world. So we've
exactly.
really leveraged that ourselves to make sure we're understanding, this property may be located in Scottsdale, Arizona, but everybody visiting it's from all over the world.
All over.
Yeah.
Yeah, and which is fascinating. I mean, I think that's one of the things I love about EDSA. We have such a strong cultural focus with people from all over the world. We have about 25 countries represented here and several languages spoken. I mean, at one point in my design studio, I think we counted 15 languages. One of my colleagues, she speaks four just by herself. And so it was always really cool to have that exposure to different cultures. And the coolest thing that brought us all together was not only our love for design and landscape architecture, but our love for food, hanging out, music, learning different types of ways you live, and those were, moments that we still celebrate. I mean, we celebrate all sorts of holidays from all over the world, and what typically brings us all together is getting around and having different dishes and learning about one's culture. It's really cool.
I love that. And I think, like you're saying, food and music is such a nice way to connect people where all the, what we sometimes see as differences in political views, religious views,
Oh
whatever
yeah,
those are, is to really put those out of the window and just say, no, we want to learn about each other and we're excited to learn about each other and celebrate each other's nuances. And I think that's just such a nice way. And it's a nice way, I think, to remember in our current times as well, that that's how we can connect each other. And we are all very connected.
yeah, and,
Just
and
don't
it's
think
been
about
done
it
before
enough.
in the '70s and the early '80s. Bob Marley really pushed the envelope. I mean, he's a hero of mine, and whenever someone tells me that I remind them of him, I'm very honored.
Yeah.
I'm like, I know my hair is similar, but I don't look anything like him. But he's a hero, so that's a big deal. And that the whole aspect of one love and caring for people, and bringing people together around music, and it's such a phenomenon that I remember traveling in Egypt in the 2000s, and I was in Kona Gray, the old cultural center, the old souk where the markets are, and people were chasing me. They were like, Bob Marley, Bob Marley, Bob Marley. And they
That's
wanted my
brilliant.
picture, and it was just such a warm thing. Even though I know who I am, and they know that I'm not Bob Marley, but it was just that you could learn very quickly what he had done, and it still does for the entire world. It's bringing people together.
Yeah, bringing people together, having, having being courageous, standing up for what you believe in. And
Oh yeah.
yeah. And even now, I think this is where we can get misguided at times, that we have belief systems that are based on something we read or something we hear. But if you actually spend time with a culture or in a country, your belief system would change. So you could go there with one belief and guarantee it would change by the time you leave. And I think that's where we all need to be a little bit more open-minded when we're reading the news or interacting with people of different races and cultures.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. My wife and I talk about this often. As humans, we've done a really good job of categorizing and labeling so many different things in our world. And I guess that's a way for us to help us comprehend, the differences. And it doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, we're all human. There's one species, there's one race, as it relates to us Homo sapiens. And I think what's really fascinating about that is if you really dive deep, people need the same things. It's very simple. You shelter, you need access to the outdoors, you need food, you need water, you need this clean air that hopefully we breathe. I mean, all these things are very, very simple and universal, yet we find ways um, to disagree over it and fight over it. And it's like, no, this is this is basic. This is
Yeah.
like basic survival,
Yeah.
and the more we sort of step back and think about the need for us to be, open and have purpose and to care about people, the better we can certainly be.
That actually leads me to one thing that I heard you say when it comes to purpose. And we are very thinking that once you have a purpose, your work transforms immensely.
Very simple.
Um,
Yeah,
and I think I heard you say that your purpose is about connecting humanity with the environment. Is that
that's
how you would
correct.
define your?
Really straightforward. Yeah,
Yeah.
I figured this out about 10 years ago that my purpose in life and career is to connect humanity to the environment. And it really resonates in every single interaction with a human where I can explain to them the benefits of being outside and the importance of caring for that 80-year-old tree that's in your backyard and realizing how closely connected we are with the land and understanding that if the land wasn't here, we wouldn't be here. And it's like this this simple understanding that many indigenous cultures got from the get-go is something that us as advanced folks need a little reminders, to kind of pull ourselves back to that simplicity of, okay, there's a reason why we are here. There's a reason why the land supports us. And when we learn how to support the land and Mother Nature herself, we're actually supporting ourselves in return. It's kind of a selfish thing that you don't even think about. But when you do it, you realize it very quickly that, oh wow, I'm I'm benefiting from this. This is great.
So true. And so you sort of discovered your purpose 10 years ago. When you first got into landscape architecture, what was your sort of outlook, or why did you think you were getting into it at that stage?
Oh wow, it's a love for design first and foremost. I mean, I've been drawing since I was tiny. I mean, my dad's an architect. I grew up in his business, and I can remember doing little sketches, while he was bringing work home all the time. And what I realized was that I had this clear understanding of you can create these experiences, these environments. You can design these environments, and when I stumbled into landscape architecture after spending time in fine art as well as architecture, it was kind of an aha moment. It was like, oh, this is what I've been thinking about. This is what I've been doing for all this time, and didn't really put it together. And but starting my career, I mean, I was just excited to learn and to draw and to travel and to just have all these experiences. And I always encourage people who are getting into this industry of design and development to be curious, get out there, figure things out, ask questions. Don't sit back and be, kind of a bystander. Be a really confident observer of what's happening in the world, because it's really fascinating if you take the time to just check it out.
What's interesting, and we don't see as much anymore, you've been at EDSA a long time, which is so refreshing to see and hear. What is it about that company that's kept you there, or what do you love about it?
Yeah, so my EDSA story is very interesting. I discovered EDSA out of a necessity. So wrapping up my education at the University of Georgia, my landscape architecture degree, one of the requirements is a capstone project. Most universities have, your final thesis, capstone, whatever it is. And because my grandmother operated a boutique hotel in the early days of my life, and watching that, I was always fascinated with this level of hospitality that I didn't fully understand, but I was always fascinated with it. And in design school, I was like, would really love to design an eco resort. That's really what I want to do. So I reached out to our advisor, and she's like, yeah, come meet with me. Let's talk about what you want to do. Your time is running out. And I pitched the idea, and she was like, "Yeah, we don't have an eco resort for you to design." And she was like, you're going to end up doing, community project here, or a park, or something like that." And I was like, "Okay, those are cool, but I really want to do a resort." And she's like, "Well, if you can find one, great." And so I'm leaving her office, and there's an EDSA internship poster across the hall from her door.
Oh, I love that.
I'm like, wait a minute. I was like, these guys design resorts, because they had all their images of all the different resorts. And there was a phone number there. And this is before email, before, cell phones, all that kind of stuff. So I wrote down their number, and I cold called them.
Wow.
And I was fortunate enough to get connected with my partner, Rich Santalella. And Rich was like, okay, you're a student, you want a project? Well, send me a handwritten letter requesting this project. And he wanted it handwritten, and the architectural lettering, which fortunately I was very well versed in. And sent the letter, and he finally got back to me at the 11th hour. And I was like, great. And I came because, it wasn't easy to send files over, over the internet, because that wasn't happening back then. I came down with a friend of mine, and the particular project that they identified for me, the studio working on that project was actually on a deadline for that particular project. And I walked in, and I told them who I was, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we have the information for you, but can you wait, because we're on a deadline?" And I was like, "Okay." And I was looking, I was like, you guys need some help?" And they were like, "Yeah." And they were like, "Do you know CAD?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do, because I'd worked through school, so I knew CAD." And they were like, "Sit there and help us." And I was like, "Absolutely." And I ended up working I came down over spring break to get this last base information. I worked the entire week. And at the end of the week, accounting was wondering, do we pay this guy? Did we hire him? What's going on? Why does he keep coming back here? And I did that because I wanted to. That was an initiative that I felt very comfortable, doing, because many other students were out, on the beach, and I was working that week at EDSA. And the practice, much of our practice back then was focused on getting things out the door, and at that end of that week, we would celebrate that work. And that experience of coming together and talking about the week, and having a beer, and having a little food. I didn't realize my conversation with my partner, Bob Bailing, was my interview.
Mm.
I had no idea. So
Wow.
I wrapped up. I went back to school. I finished up the effort. I sent them. So funny. I sent them a zip drive. I don't know if you remember.
Yep.
Yeah, of
It was
course.
like
We
a
do.
big hard drive that would carry a lot of data, and some hard copies. I still have them. And thought that was, I was good. I was in Atlanta, the area. I was going to go and find a job in Atlanta. I was all ready to go. And Bob called me. He's like, "Would you consider coming to work here?" And I was like, "Really? It's a job offer?" I was like, "Okay, let me think about it." And I asked one of my professors, and I said, "Do you know about this EDSA company?" He's like, "Wait a minute, EDSA? You mean Ed Stone, Edward Durrell Stone, Junior Associate?" I was like, "Yeah, who are these guys?" And I was like, "They just offered me a job." And he's like, "Yeah, you might want to take that
That's so
That's
cool.
awesome.
He's
That's
like,
amazing.
this is one of the best firms in the world, for what we do. And there's a long history and legacy to this company. And so I took the offer. And I remember they offered me 28K back then. This was late 90s. And I countered at 29 because I was 29 years old at the time. I was an older student when I wrapped up. And they accepted the offer, and I was really excited to take it. And I came in, and what I realized immediately was that even though I knew I was a hard worker and all of that, this was a very talented group that was willing to share. And so I
Mm.
was completely humbled immediately. I was a good student, but I felt that I needed to continue to learn, and that's what happened. I shared lots of ideas. The cultural fit was amazing. We work hard, but we also played hard. And there was never a moment where I felt that I didn't belong. And I think that was the main thing that has kept me here was just having this sense of belonging and caring and being able to share ideas and don't get me wrong, that I've been here 27 years. There's always rough times in every company, and I've learned from that. I've learned to create the place I want to be, no matter where that is, and
Mm.
that's what's kept me here.
That's amazing story. That's really cool. I was thinking when you were describing, quite in the beginning, you obviously saw a certain leadership and culture. How would you describe it was back then and what it is still now or how it has changed?
Yeah, it's evolved over the years. We
Yeah.
are on our fourth generation of leadership. Ed Stone obviously started the company back in the '60s. My mentor Joe Lally took it from there in the mid '90s to the 28, actually 2008. Yeah, and he just really helped us grow dramatically, and we really have learned a lot over the years. And then my partner Doug Smith took it from there, from the Great Recession to the pandemic, and now my partner Scott Lamont is currently leading. And the one thing that all of them have in common is this sense of opportunity, creating opportunity for people, trying your best to continue to evolve, but also excel, and finding ways to enjoy it. We if we're not enjoying what we're doing, there's something wrong. And I think that's one of the greatest things that I've learned.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating how companies evolve, and you've obviously seen those transitions, and now it's obviously a key member of the next, the future. In terms of design and the types of projects, how has that evolved since you've been at the company?
Oh my goodness, that's been the amazing sort of transformation. I mean, I remember talking to Ed before he passed away. I was like, Ed, did you ever imagine we'd be doing projects at this scale? And he was like, never. In my
Mm.
wildest dreams did I think that we would be looking at this. We fortunately have always been a global company due to Ed's father, Edward Durrell Stone Sr., a fantastic architect, Starchitect before the term Starchitect was cool. I mean, he designed, he was very heavily involved with MoMA on that design, and Columbus Circle, to Columbus Circle, a lot of really amazing projects in New York and Chicago and all over the world. But what took us, you know, out of the country was the international assignments he received. The U.S. Embassy in New Delhi, um, project in Pakistan many years ago. These were all unbelievable jobs that still stay with us today. That's our legacy and history that's led us to do certainly some of the top projects in the world, but also some of the projects that are most memorable. We don't. I don't think we have a particular style of design. It's very contextual
Hmm.
and very based on that place and that culture and those people. And that really resonates with me, and the land specifically, which is really fantastic. So I've watched the sort of the evolution to the point where we have advanced so much, where we have access to new technology that's allowing us to design even further, and we have access to lots of new talent. I mean, that's the thing I find so fascinating and impressive is seeing all the young designers coming out of school that are just ready to go and have so many great ideas. And we embrace that. We have a very strong program as it relates to recruitment and relationships with universities and internship programs, and doing everything we can to continue to elevate the profession, which is really, it's really on the rise. I mean, I tell people many times that this is the age of landscape architecture. It's been overlooked for many years, but I know for a fact that this is the time, and it's really fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with that awareness of how the environment and nature really heals us with what's going on right now, with the pace of life, with
Oh yeah.
technology, with just being overstimulated. You just mentioned one thing that I wanted to ask you when you were talking about not having a specific design style, but really more it being about the place, the location, the culture, and then the land. Do you have any rituals or things that you do to yourself when you first come to a place, into the land, to really feel into those energies and environment?
Yeah.
What's your process to dive into that?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because it's one of the reasons why I do what I do. I think that growing up in Liberia and spending so much time listening to the land, being out, I was outdoors a lot, and I didn't realize what impression the environment was having on me at that young age. And certainly most landscape architects that I know have this connection to the outdoors, whether it was from camping as a child or their grandparents had a farm or whatever it was. There's this really rich connection to nature that I think is important, and our process evolves around that. What I think is really fascinating about the work we do is we always do our best to engage our clients in an initial session on the site. A work session, charrette, whatever you want to call it. And it's part of our methodology, where we get on the ground and listen to the land, essentially. And it's all about your senses. It's about what you experience. It's about observing what the land is telling you. Where are the high points, where are the low points, where are the special features that really matter. And that can happen in an urban environment, rural environment. It just takes that understanding of process in order to really return with the best conclusion. And in many cases, because we still draw by hand quite a bit, and that's part of our methodology as well. So in many cases, we're meeting on site. We're discovering the place. We're getting to know the culture. We're meeting people before we begin to draw. And then when we start to have an understanding of the land and analyze, we start sketching. And that is like magic. There's nothing more. There's nothing more impressive than sitting down with a client that has this vision and idea and this desire, and actually drawing the sort of the idea out of their minds and onto paper, through our interpretation. It's so impressive. It's one of those things that we promote. We never discount it. We always tell people this is a critical part of the process. And if you are serious, if you really want to have an amazing outcome, bring all the right people, bring all the right minds together. Let's sit down together and let's just focus on this for 2 days, 3 days, a week at the most, to really sort of gel that thought and that idea. And that's the basis of our planning process that really is quite spectacular, I think.
I just had one thought. The way you were describing this process, especially in the beginning of listening to the land, incorporating the client into the process, hand drawing, sketching, it really sounds like a very magic formula. And what's
Hmm.
interesting to me is that I've recently, because I love computer drawing, I love that it's fast, I love the iPad. And I've really tried recently to connect back to just a hand sketch. And it is unbelievable what a difference it makes, how the connection from your brain through your hand, the energy, it's very different, and something very different comes out. And that's why I'm so glad that you're mentioning that, because I think anyone, especially starting in that profession, it's really a magic to connect back to your hand and not be afraid of it as well. Like, it doesn't have to be a perfect sketch. It's more about the idea and the energy that goes into it, and the spark that comes out of it. So
Absolutely.
that's the
No, we call it design thinking when you have an opportunity to express your thinking through design
yeah.
quickly. And as you said, it's very important to realize that this is not a masterpiece. This is a quick sketch. It's not precious. It's a way to get the idea across. And this is another way to communicate across cultures as well. I mean, I've been really fortunate to travel to many different places and work with folks that, you know, may not have a strong grasp of English, and I may be in a position where I don't have a strong grasp of their local language, but we communicate through the sketch. It's amazing. It's so refreshing, and I have so many sketchbooks from the past that I won't get rid of. And I continue to use a little notebook, and in that notebook, I take notes and I sketch. And there was a period in my career early on where I learned the power of journaling. And on many of the trips, that I would travel on and be a part of, the process of journaling along the way and taking little sketches was always a benefit in the design process. And you always go back to those. And what's fascinating about technology though is that even though we do a lot of things that people may still consider old school, we think it's really important in the process of design evolution, all the way into we embraced technology in a major way years ago, and so the majority of our designers have tablets at their desk. They use the larger Wacom tablet, and so we're still connected to the brain through the hand, even in the digital way. Many of us have laptops that have screens on them that we can draw on. We use iPads whenever we can. It's just such a really liberating thing to know that you can do both. And leveraging that as much as you possibly can is key. I mean, I still remember the days of, traveling on being away from the office in a workshop, and, having a large sheet of trace, designing the whole thing, project, and taking a picture of it with my iPhone, and then, flipping that back to the office and having someone grab it and, edit it and, enhance it. And so it's really cool to know that we have all that at our disposal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I started off my stepdad's architecture firm when I was sort of young. I'd go in at the weekends, and I was fascinated by technical drawing. It was back then. It was drawing boards and tracing paper, and I liked having the structure of straight lines. My sketching, I
Hmm.
never had the confidence to sketch because I judged my ability on how well I could sketch, not the idea I was creating.
Yes.
So I loved the technical drawing. So that was my early exposure. And then as I've got further into my career and lost the ego about how good the sketch is, um, it's so important for conveying a quick idea. And we tell our team the same.
Oh
Just
yeah.
get off the computer. Just come up with 20 ideas. It doesn't need to look like anything. It's just testing an idea, having a thought process, getting it on paper. It's so important still.
It's liberating. When I studied architecture at the Boston Architectural College, and one of the most impressive experiences I had, that has left an imprint on me as a designer, was we went through this process called sketch problems. And they would bring the studio in, and they would give us a prompt, and we had exactly 45 minutes to develop a partie. Like, this is what this is all about, and then develop that partie into a design. It didn't need to be a final finished product with models and all that stuff. This was all hand drawn, quick sketches, and what it did was it taught us how to think on our feet. It taught us how to make decisions and not, because it's really easy to sort of muddle around on something for hours. It taught us how to just, just get the idea out, and it doesn't matter what it is as long as it's responding to this prompt. And that was really fascinating. I hope, and I know that not many schools are continuing with this process, but I hope that we find a way to get back to that, because I visit a lot of programs around the country, and I don't see as much hand drawing as I would like. I think that there's this desire to really get people technically proficient in the computer, and that's great. But when you come into an office, you're going to learn, because everything's different. So understanding how to design, is more important than understanding how to be technically proficient, in my opinion.
Can agree more. Slight segue now into the conversation around wellness and well-being. That's a lot of the focus of these conversations. And it'd be interesting to get your viewpoint on, I can imagine that being in the world of landscape architecture you're in, that it's just innate that part of what you're doing is creating spaces.
Oh, yeah.
But is it that you've always done that and now it's just things are getting labeled wellness and well-being, or are you seeing an extra level of that being integrated?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of an extra level, but I do believe that the foundation of landscape architecture has always been focused on that understanding, that lifestyle of caring about the land and being connected to the land and listening to the land. One of my major heroes in our space is Ian McHarg, and Ian's work, was back in the '60s. Really was the foundation of getting the message out. It wasn't that it wasn't already happening; it just wasn't being fully conveyed. And Ian's book, Design with Nature, that was published in 1969, was an amazing testament to how landscape architects are being trained to explore possibilities through a very strong understanding of the land. And he basically invented this whole system of layering all of the constraints and opportunities to arrive at the most suitable place for a transformation to occur. And that meant staying out of floodplains, staying out of the steep slopes, staying out of the areas that are undesirable in terms of their ecological benefit, and really focusing on the places that would allow the land to have the most maximum benefit to that particular project or development or large regional plan or whatever it was. And it's just it's pretty fascinating that all of that ties back to wellness, even though we didn't even think about it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
even you think about Central Park. Central Park is all about wellness, and that's Olmsted, was brought in to solve a problem. People were having health issues in that compact island of Manhattan, and Central Park was a response to, outbreak of disease, and giving people more opportunity to have exposure to the outdoors. I was watching this documentary some time ago about some of the things they did in those days in the city. Is they actually had these for people in apartments, in these high-rise apartments. They had these window boxes that would allow mothers to place their children outside of the house, in a window box, so that
No
they would,
way.
yeah, they would get exposure to sunlight and fresh air, and not be down there with all the smog and everything.
Yeah.
And it was this really fascinating understanding of this need for nature. And this need for nature has so much to do with our survival and our
Mm-hmm.
well-being. And I've been extremely focused over the last decade or so with the advent of the blue zones, and learning why people live longer,
Yeah.
and what is it about these places. And the work that Dan Butner has done is just really fascinating. Tracking and understanding, why people in these certain places live over 100 years. And it's really pretty fascinating to see sort of the results of those studies. For one, the people are eating very well. They are also very connected to family,
Yeah.
and they're connected to the people where they are. They move, and the movement is not going to the gym and working out for hours. The movement is gardening or walking to your church, and things that simple, and they're spiritually connected. And it's these little things that you would think are not a big deal, but you can actually create these blue zones anywhere in the world in your life if you follow some of these simple principles of just really looking at how to you know care in a broader way. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, we can agree more. We love that series, and what it really resonated with us was that, I'm from just outside of London, and Isa's from Germany. So much of our upbringing and culture is around getting from A to B under self-propulsion, whether that's walking or you're on a bike. That was the biggest shock for me moving here, especially to the sort of Phoenix, Scottsdale area. You can't walk anywhere. You cannot walk anywhere. So
There's not many sidewalks. Yeah, it's so hot.
It's it's partly hot, but I mean, it's if people see you walking there, they kind of look at you weird. It's kind of like, what are you doing? But it's it's what is interesting is that, and are you seeing? I know we're in a unique city, but are you seeing those influences at any time being brought to the United States, or you're being asked to integrate them more into your projects?
Oh my goodness, absolutely. I mean, I think the whole idea of walkable communities. There's a major movement for this sort of 10-minute, 15-minute walk to a park. These a lot of these ideas are not new. They're born out of sort of the settlement patterns of indigenous people, or historic villages. Whether in Europe or whether in Africa or any continent that they are. Many of these cultures, they did this out of necessity. I mean, you had to walk to do things, and those cultures were extremely healthy from the standpoint of even though they may not had access to many of the conveniences we have. The major major convenience they had was to a better quality of life, of just living well, eating better, foraging, spending time with nature. All those things really or have come full circle, where we're designing places that are, reconnecting to that whole idea of, okay, there's a better way to do this, and there's a simpler way to do this. There's a way for us to reconnect and restitch these communities, because it really comes down to that. Why are we not appreciating those daily rituals of spending time outdoors? And we do the best we can in our busy lives. And my wife and I and our daughter, we try to walk our dogs as much as we possibly can and spend time outside. And I think all those things help us, stay grounded, but also stay healthy.
Yeah, I think the grounded part is really important. And it makes me think, going back to what you were saying earlier, is that real nice connection of going back to the roots, to the ancient wisdom, to what people and cultures have always done, and then connecting it with the future, the technology, the things that we have, the conveniences we have now, and kind of putting those two together. I think that's for me where the magic lies a little bit, to not go off in the future, forget the roots, and then also not to live in the past and not acknowledge that things are changing, but just really that connection of the two. I think that's really for me, that's kind of the magic point where I feel like I'm living my best life.
Yeah, and what that is? That's living in the moment. It's interesting to me because, the past is history, right? There's nothing you can do about it, but you can learn from it. The future is super unknown. I mean, we can make all these predictions, but it still doesn't matter. I mean, someone thinks they have a crystal ball, or they can predict the market or whatever is going to happen in the world. They really can't, because it's constantly changing. But what's most important is the moment, and the moment now is influenced by the past and the future. And it's like whatever we can do to stay present and to really, lean into that and to look at it from a different perspective is really really great. I think for me, even going back to the blue zone, the one thing that I noticed that every one of the blue zones had in common was this idea of outlook. People were just happy, you know. They were really, you know, not concerned about the past and not, worrying about that and not worrying about the future. They were happy in the present. They were really focused on, spending the most amazing time they could with the people they were with at that particular moment and really enjoying it and then, moving on to the next. It wasn't about being, so angry about what happened 20 days ago or a year ago or 10 years ago. It doesn't matter. It's in the past. Or being so anxious and nervous about the future. It's like, the sky is falling. It's
Yeah.
like, no, it's not. You don't know that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't. What you really know is what's right in front of you, and that's fantastic.
Yeah, and it's I know. I mean, it's hard for me to do at times just because there's so much going on and responsibilities, and it's easy to look back and forward at times because
Hmm.
it's hard to sometimes control the emotions in the now. I mean, you did
Yeah.
mention the future there a little bit. What is the future for you? What does EDSA look like in the future? What would be your compelling legacy that you feel like, oh, what a mark I made on the world?
Wow, that's a great question because we're living our legacy right now. I mean, if you think about it, founded in 1960, out of a garage in Pompano Beach, Florida, to where we are today in 19, in wow, 64 years, right? That's just pretty incredible. Most companies don't have this kind of legacy, and we're very cautious in regards to not being stuck in our history. We are a future forward looking company and we're always looking for opportunities and open to ideas and learning from different ways of being human. But I think that the one thing that's always present here is knowing that the future is bright. There is an opportunity to keep going. And I think that's really that's really incredible. That's the thing that allows you to I when I wake up every day, I'm very first of all grateful that I woke up, and
Yeah,
second of all, I'm
absolutely.
happy
I
that
feel you.
I'm going to do something that I love. I'm
Yeah.
I'm going to draw. I don't go to work. I keep telling people that I don't go and clock in and work. It's really it's a part of my being, an expression of living and enjoying what I'm doing, that it doesn't become a burden. When it becomes a burden, when it's challenging, when it's like, I don't know if I want to go, you got that's a point where you have to revisit your priorities, and revisit, why you exist and what your purpose is, because I think that if you don't have those aligned, you're really going to have a tough time, in life. And so our future is extremely bright. It's been bright every decade, even during the hard times. There's always been this light of, well, what if, it's not about, what could go wrong. It's about what can go right. It's
Mm-hmm.
thinking about, well, what if we try that? That might be really cool. Let's give that a shot. And it's happened successfully so many times, and sometimes it doesn't work. But we, it's not a failure. It's an opportunity. I guess you call it failing forward. I think this quote I'm trying to remember from Nelson Mandela that it's like I never lose. I either win or I learn. Right. So
Absolutely.
it's that sort of glass half full optimism that is really invigorating, and I'm telling you, it's inspirational. It gets people excited. If I'm ever in a position where someone is just really laying out all the problems, I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
God, stop. Just stop.
Yeah.
Just stop for a moment. I mean, and stop scaring people. Wow, we have so much to be thankful for and grateful for, and if we were all rowing in the same direction of positivity and a promising future of abundance and not a
Yeah.
future of scarcity, wow, we would just be on cloud nine. It there would be no way to stop us because we wouldn't have all of that doubt,
Yeah.
Yeah.
slowing us down.
I love that description. It absolutely resonates with how we feel about the opportunities we're given, like you're saying, as well as being grateful to wake up and have the life we have. I mean, that's
Yeah.
already amazing in itself. And then
Oh,
just
it is. No, I pinch myself. I live in Fort Lauderdale, Florida on vacation every day, basically. It's like people come here for vacation and it's like the sun, well, today's a rainy day, but it's still beautiful, but the
Yeah.
sun is typically shining. The beach is right down the street. Most people are happy. And when I see someone that's unhappy here, I'm like, I scratch my head. I'm like, really? What, what's, is this really that bad?
That's funny. But what's interesting is like the way you were describing it, because sometimes when people hear that and say you live in a beautiful place, of course you're happy, of course you're grateful. But I'm in
Hmm.
this circumstance. What you mentioned before is really about mindset as well, because in
Totally.
any situation, I think we can find a positive, a strength, getting ourselves out of that situation as well, if it's not the one we want to be in. And I think mindset is what you really described as well. That's how we can really change our life and our perspective on life and finding our purpose through that too.
Absolutely, and I know for a fact you can make the place what you want it to be. It's up to you, right?
Yeah.
No one's forcing you to do things. At least I hope they're not. And it's really up to every individual to sort of leverage that superpower we all have as humans to, create opportunities and to have fun and to love your family and to be kind to people know and people you don't know because we're all in this together. If we don't get that, it will certainly be the demise. But fortunately, there are enough people that get it that sort of lead by example that allow people to say, okay, yes, I was angry about that, but I really don't need to be.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
hopefully that's
Kona,
the
you are a living example for that. I mean,
oh,
like I
thank
said,
you.
like the second I met you, I knew this is a cool guy behind it, and it got deeper and deeper. And the way you were talking as well today, and how you really show leadership and creativity to your team and the people that are new in this industry, it's amazing. So I'm really,
Oh,
yeah,
Nisa, thank you so much. And I got to tell you,
it's from the
I
heart.
love what you're doing. I really appreciate it. And I love what you're doing because one of the podcasts I was fortunate enough to listen to was the one you did with Cole Cannon. And he had this note. And then if I'm remembering this correctly, he said, how you start your day is how you end your day. And when he made that statement, I was like,
Yeah.
wow, I just learned something very
Yeah.
important here.
Yeah.
It's like this, and that's why I appreciate when folks like you do these things because it gives you an opportunity to learn something from anyone that is fortunate enough to be able to share, and I think that's really fascinating.
I mean, that's great for us to hear because when we set out on this journey, we wanted it to be obviously a supplement to our day job, but it's all
Hmm.
about building relationship for us. And selfishly, yeah, we do want to learn from people like yourself and get influenced. And then we just hope that, yeah, the people that listen to it, they get those little nuggets and it just gives them a little bit of inspiration or a different way of thinking about something. And it's also interconnected. What we all do every day touches people's lives, whether they consciously see it, understand, or if it's just a subconscious
Yeah.
interaction. So it's just the more we can keep learning and growing from each other, it's just exciting for
And
us.
collaborate and
Yeah.
just, yeah.
Oh my goodness, yeah, that's probably the greatest pleasure in terms of design is that whole opportunity to collaborate and
Yeah.
just draw out these ideas together and to learn. And we had a design workshop here in our office for a client for a project down in the Turks and Caicos recently, and we were fortunate enough to that the client was new to resort design and new to this business and was open to being a part of this process and dedicated so much time, 2 days they dedicated directly. And many clients come and go in these workshops, but these guys, they stuck around. And what was really interesting about that was that we brought in designers in the space of landscape architecture ourselves. Architecture, we brought in an interior architect. We actually had a contractor who was very knowledgeable about development in the Caribbean, and we had an economist as well on the team that was part of the workshop. And the last group we had, which I think was, I'm so happy we reached out to them, was a group that is very well versed in branding and marketing. We had the most amazing experience of taking this client's idea and vision and developing it into within 2 days, literally. The first day we had it pretty out in terms of the program and the purpose and the vision, and then the second day was just refining it, and it was a home run. But what was fascinating was having all those minds together thinking, and we would break away and concentrate on one thing. Our economist was concentrating on the pro forma, and we had the interior folks concentrating on sort of the interior feel and look, and our architect concentrating on the exterior feel, the buildings, the shape, and we were looking at the whole thing and sort of bringing it all together. And then we would come back together and just, wow, that's it. And it's such a great experience of collaboration, and I highly recommend clients and collaborators that are all professionals, continue to do this. And I know a lot of architects out there, have a lot of all these moving parts in-house, but I think that when you are able to branch out and bring people from anywhere that are the most, appropriate for the assignment, it just allows you to learn so much more and be so much more free to the ideas. It's fun.
Yeah, and ultimately the end product is the beneficiary of that, isn't it? It's
Completely.
Yeah.
Completely. And the contractor actually stood up and gave a testimonial at the end of the exercise. He's like, I just want to let you know, as the client, this process just saved you 6 months and several $1,000s.
I was just gonna say that the positivity, the fun that went into it, and the shorter amount of time, because when you're in your silo, you can sit over something, noodle over it, be in your own head, and then it takes forever, then you get bored of it, and it's just a very different process, what you were describing.
Very different process. Yeah. That's the beauty of what we do. And then, and when you remember that process, and that sketch turned into this built, amazing experience that people are enjoying, and it's economically viable, and it's doing great. I mean, that's just so impressive. It just really is. And I think a lot of people take it for granted. They don't realize how much effort goes into what we do. And what it produces. And fortunately, there are folks that do get it. And they're the ones we want to work with, for sure.
Absolutely. Amen. Well, Kona, this has been a intriguing, fascinating conversation. We could keep talking to you for hours. And
Likewise.
And we look very much looking forward to carrying on the conversation, and obviously seeing you in person, and hopefully getting to collaborate too at some point in the future.
Yes,
that'd be a dream come true for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I, every time I remind myself that there are opportunities out there that all we need to do is just lean into them and go get it.
Absolutely.
And have fun. I think there's great synergies between our companies, and our ethos is very aligned. This is really cool.
Perfect.
Well, thank you so much.
That was such fun and good energy to talk to you today.